A beautiful morning to you. Thank you for being a part of this week's episode of your Business with Accent Dominis. My name is Daniel Olukayode Adeyemo, and I'm bringing you, I'll be taking you through one of the policies that you need for your business. So if you remember, 2 weeks ago when we looked at privacy policy, we looked at the fact that, I emphasized the fact that policies, not generally, but some policies do take their root from existing laws, created by the legislation. Now, the policy we'll be looking at today, is one of those policies that typically grabs its essence from the laws that are already existing. Now, we'll be looking at workplace safety policy, and of course, looking at this policy in itself, it also has its own root from some of the laws on employment, on Labor Act, we see some of the Employee Compensation Act, some of those laws that provide for the duties of employers towards employees, and of course the duties of employees as well. So some of these laws, kind of influence the need to create, policies in every business, big or small, regardless of the nature of the business you run, be it a factory, be it a small business, whatever, these laws, have influenced these policies, have influenced the need to create some of these policies, to ensure that employees are kept safe. So now, now, this policy is about basically ensuring the health and the well-being and then the safety of employees. Really, what this does is that it imputes a duty of care on employers to actually, carry out reasonable actions that tend to protect the health, the safety, and then the well-being of employees. Because of course, in the course of doing your business, you have employees that work for you, and it's ordinarily imputed on you that you should ensure that these people are safe, but then it's not a one-sided thing. So we'll be looking at the balance to it as we move on, right? So now, duties of employees and of employers. Now, an employer is to ensure that the employees are safe. It's to provide a safe environment for the employees to work. So now looking at this, there's need for the employer to have health and safety procedures, processes, and even handbooks that reflect how how are we going to, what will govern the relationship between myself and my employee generally, and then even in terms of how would I protect them. The handbook should also cover situations like how to make use of the equipment we've provided. Some of the, taking a factory for example, some of those equipment, how to deal with those equipment in such a way that they are not harmed in the course of doing the business, right? So, and now beyond this, it's okay to actually have handbooks and procedures, processes, all those things on ground for employees to be able to take good advantage of. What one very important thing is, I think even the most important thing, is being able to communicate some of these things to them, right? So because some of these processes, procedures, and all these things, they come with detailed explanation, like I said, on how to deal with maybe the equipment, how to run things in the company, but then it has to be communicated to them. You have to be sure as an employer that these people, they understand what we're talking about. They understand how to deal with this machine. Let me give you a very good example. For example, we have let's say you have a machine that in a bottling company, for example, there will be an handbook that will state, okay, this is how you relate to this machine, this is how you do this, how you do this. Of course, apart from that, there will be trainings as well, to just keep them updated, just to know what to do and what not to do, just for their safety, right? So now, another thing is provision of first aid kits in case of emergencies. Emergencies are bound to happen, even despite being careful in how you deal with, how you, in the working environment, basically, there will be times that, one injury here, one injury there, and it could be something that, if just a mini, first aid kit, of course, because the situation we have currently is that in some companies we have the first aid kit, but then they don't really have the components. There are certain things you need, right? So we need to have this first aid kit such that situations that can be easily contained at that point in time, we're able to contain it, and then if you have to take it to the hospital, then you can as well go ahead with that. So we also have the need to ensure plant and machinery are safe, are safe, and then they are regularly maintained. It's not enough to just buy these things. Yes, you buy them, then what do you do next? You don't just leave it at the mercy of people that are using to just go about it the way they want, because at the end of the day, their safety, your liability is tied to their safety. right? So you need to ensure that these equipment are regularly, taken care of. They're regularly maintained. We have to just, it has to be like regularly serviced. You need to bring in technicians that are really vast, that really understand some of this equipment, to check it from time to time to see, oh, is the equipment okay? Just to protect the people that are using it, because you as the owner, you might not interact with some of this equipment, but then your employees that regularly interact with this equipment in making things, mostly in factories, it's necessary that you ensure that this equipment, this machinery, these plants are in good shape and they are regularly checked. Then we also have the need to ensure proper ventilation, temperature, lighting, toilet washing, and rest facilities. So now the truth of the matter is, these things, they might seem very, very ventilation and all these things, but then they are very key. They are very necessary. Ventilation, for you might have an employee that has issues with asthma, an asthmatic patient. The simple issues like ventilation could, cause, reactions and some of these things. Looking at lighting, of course, you need a well-lit environment to actually work. In a situation where you are in a factory where there are sharp things all over the place, not necessarily lying, all over the place carelessly, but then they are in strategic places. But imagine a place is dark, and as a worker, you have to step into the place, and then you get to, I don't know, dip your hands into things you shouldn't dip your hands into, maybe something hot or something. These things seem basic, but these are things that have really brought about court issues. They really brought about issues in court, that subject matter of disputes. So it's very necessary that this there be proper ventilation, temperature, lighting. The toilet has to be in good shape. It has to be clean. It don't take you anything to get a cleaner to come around to ensure that everywhere is properly placed, because at the end of the day, the amount you spend, let's even say it doesn't go to court for any reason, something that can be contained, the amount you spend on medical facility, medical aids for that employee that really suffers some kind of disadvantage, then when you compare it to what you could have done, you see that you're actually at a loss. So it's very necessary for you to take every necessary step to ensure that the employees that work for you are in good shape. They are not exposed to injury, to harm, to any of those vices. Now, ensure also the employers also ensure that the right work equipment is provided, properly used, and regularly maintained. We already spoke about that. So you need to, beyond providing it, you need to ensure that they are properly used, and then they are also properly maintained. Now you need to enlighten your employees on potential hazards, when it comes to interacting with some of these equipment. I'm very sure these are the things that will be contained in your handbook on, okay, this, in dealing with this equipment, you need to do this, you need to do this, you don't do this, you don't do that. This is where you actually make it clear to them that, okay, these are the things you need to do, right? So everything is necessary, like just to protect your employees, to ensure their safety, and to ensure that they don't come into harm. Now another thing is to ensure adequate supervision. It almost escaped my mind. So in practical sense, most of the cases we have in court today, you see situation where the employee, the supervisor probably just went out for a little, just to take a break, just on his own, and then something happens. There has to be a supervisor that supervises how everything goes, the use of the equipment, how things are going. He has to be there. It's very, very necessary. Now, another duty of an employer is to take precautions against risks caused by the equipment. It could be noise, it could be inflammable hazards, and some of those things. So it's for you to look at your work environment and say, oh, what can possibly happen here? How can we guide against this? How can we ensure that this doesn't maybe spread or even start at all? Now you can look at getting low noise tools. They can be quite expensive, but then they save you in the long run. Low noise tools and machinery. You can lubricate your equipment from time to time. You can create fire exits. Of course, this one is very necessary. Most of the times we see these fire exits in businesses and they're not used for years, and God forbid something happens and you need to use them. This way we actually realize how important these things are. And of course, in actually having fire exits, it's very important. Though it might seem like okay, it's normal, but then ensure that there's a clear space, such that when people need to run out through that exit, it's not, you don't need to be pulling things, removing maybe things that have been packed there for a long time. It has to be free for people to easily go through. So it's very important for us to, it's not necessarily thinking evil, but then you need to be prepared for the worst, for the worst thing that can ever happen, right? So you can also enclose or isolate the noise. You can create a sound, something that isolates noise, basically, that keeps noise away, right? So of course, provide protective clothing and write warning signs. So for protective clothing, of course, depending on the kind of business you run, you want to provide your employees with that. Then for warning signs, one thing that comes to mind, I watched a movie some time ago, and what actually happened there was that the guy was going to write, there were mines there unknown to the villagers, and then they discovered it, and just to keep people from going there and getting they decided to put something that would kind of shield, that would make people aware that, oh, this place is a danger zone, right? So he wrote it in English that, oh, keep off, danger, something, something, and the other person came and said, not everyone speaks English, and then the person went ahead and she drew that skeletal sign of danger. That in itself passes, it beats culture, it beats languages. There's no one else who doesn't understand that. So danger sign, some of those warning signs, it's very necessary that you actually have them in place in your business, especially for factories, right? So now, prevent, another duty, of course, of employees to prevent exposure to substances that may damage the health of employees. Another is to ensure the premises are well lit for ease of movement and ease of work. I already mentioned that earlier, the need for light so you can see where you're going to. It might seem very simple, but then it's very necessary. It's very necessary. Now let's try to balance the equation. Now we're looking at the things that employers need to do, the things that employers need to do to prevent harm from coming to their employees and to prevent, legal liability, of course, the employer, his own duty is just to take reasonable steps towards ensuring the safety of employees. It doesn't in any way guarantees their safety. So it's a two-way thing. They are working hand in hand. Of course, it provides some of these things, some of the safety equipment, it provides it, but then it's also to ensure that they use this equipment. But then it won't always be around. It won't always be in place. Maybe as a factory worker, for example, the employer won't always be around to see, oh, you're not wearing your equipment, you're not wearing your helmet, you're not wearing your goggle, or you're not wearing your safety jacket, or whatever he has provided for depending on the nature of the business. So since it can't be always around, it's for you as an employee to take it upon yourself to know what to actually make use of some of these things that have been provided, for you. These things that are actually at your disposal, to use this equipment to to actually help to help actualize the aim of preventing situations of injury, of accident, and all these things. So now, how can we determine that, okay, an employee, because most of the time in court, one thing they argue about is, oh, I acted reasonably, I did all I was supposed to do, and all those things. But then how do we wait? How do we say that, oh, this employer has acted reasonably well? So, but then the truth is for the court to determine. It's for the court to determine. But then, there are circumstances you can look at. When you look at the circumstances, you weigh the circumstances with the action that the employer actually carried out to see if, okay, he did something reasonable, he acted reasonably, or he did not. So some of the circumstances include the likelihood of the risk occurring, the degree of the harm which may result from the risk, how much you know about the risk, whether there were ways to eliminate or minimize the risk. So looking at some of these circumstances, looking at some of these factors, it's for the court to weigh, what the what the employer supposedly did, and weigh it alongside some of these factors to see, has he acted reasonably well, or he hasn't acted so well. So this in itself is what will now determine the ultimate liability on the employer. Now let's look at the Nigerian position to this. Now, where an employer fails to ensure the safety, the well-being, the health of his employees, now he will be liable for negligence. That's what we call it under the law. He will be liable for negligence. And then negligence is said to have happened where, of course, the policy in place, that is the safety work safety policy, has provided for the duty of care, right, on the employer. So now that the employer knows that, okay, I have this duty, how would we say that, okay, there has been a breach? There's the existence of that duty to protect the employees, right? But then through his actions or inactions or omissions, he has failed to actually, fulfill those things. He has failed to fulfill that duty of care towards his employee, and his failure has now caused, injury to his employees. Did you get that? So it's more or less like a flow from the duty, the existing duty, by virtue of the policy on ground, and of course the laws through which the policy flows from, like the duty, and then he has now breached the duty by his action or inaction, maybe failure to provide this equipment, failure to ensure that this equipment is used, to the best of his own ability. Of course, it won't be always present, like we already mentioned, and then that failure on his part now results in an injury that warrants maybe medical aid and all those things, and which might eventually come to court depending on the circumstance we're talking about, right? So now the duty of care, there's a, like we just established, there's a duty of care, there's a default, and then there's an injury. Now in this, there could be partial liability and there could be absolute liability. Now where this happens, ordinarily you say yes, there's been negligence on the part of the employer. Now this in itself could warrant partial liability or absolute liability. Now the partial liability here, we're talking about what has the employee done to contribute to this, right? So of course, for there to be negligent in the first place, it means that probably there's been an omission or an action on the part of the employer which resulted in that injury, right? So but then what about if there's a situation where the employee at that point could have prevented such a thing from happening? For example, he's not wearing his protective helmet, or he's not using his safety good that have been provided by the by the company for them to actually use. So in situation, I'm not saying this is like 100% will warrant partial liability, but then it's for the court to determine. But I'm just trying to make you understand the fact that an employee can as well contribute to the whole injury thing. It's possible that an omission also, failure of the employee to cooperate with the employer brings about this liability, which of course is partial liability. But then there can also be absolute liability. By this I'm saying that the employer can be absolutely absolved from having liability for the injury that's happened. And how does this happen? We're talking about a situation where, for example, the injury already happened, right? The injury has happened, it's agreed, and then let's say the employer has gone ahead to pay for medical services or all those things, in the name of the company, of course. And after paying let's say for example, the employee says, what? Let's say the employee had injury on the leg, maybe one of the equipment caught him or something, and then they've provided these medical services for the employee to take advantage of, for free without him paying anything. And then he feels like, what, I'm not doing this. I don't want to do this. I want to go see a native doctor that I know. He will just spray some things and then the thing will disappear, or or he just in a way does not want to take advantage of the medical aid that's been provided, or that is at his disposal. Now is for, and let's say for instance he does that and then the injury worsens and then it becomes terrible, even way terrible than it was before. At this point, the employer, most of the time, based on the law as we have it currently, will not be liable anymore. So in situations like this, it is said that the employee, has broken, the employer is actually off the chart, like is off the whole situation, because the employer has gone, okay, yes, I'm guilty. Through my act and omission or omission, I caused this to happen to you. And let's say you as a person, you took all the necessary precautions. You were using your safety this, your safety that, your goggles and everything, and then still you see manage to sustain harm or something. So and then they now provide you some of these things you need, medical aid, to just help you recuperate and all that. Ordinarily, if you are taking advantage of it and still went on to sue, of course you get something, you definitely get something as compensation or something. But then you choose to just ignore the whole medical stuff and decide to go for your own means, and unfortunately for you, your own means did not work out. At the end of the day, your employer will be absolved of liability. That's absolute liability. And like the caveat to this is this: it is for the court to decide. It is for the court to decide based on the circumstances, on ground. So now let's look at Penalty. I already mentioned the penalty already, which is compensation. Generally it's compensation you seek for. Most of the cases we see in court today of an employee being a victim of, maybe accident or injury at work, all they seek for is huge sums in terms of, compensation from the employer, and that is usually the case, right? But then let me just give you, a hint, just for you to know, and this is it. There are different laws. Now I mentioned it earlier that there are laws that actually that this policy we're talking about flows from. This policy in question, is should I say it is inspired by these laws, right? So these policies, these laws in question, they are not just one. They're like two or three. There are more. We're talking about laws that governs employer, employee, and everything. And I stated some of them earlier already, right? So now some of these laws, they ordinarily provide for, the existence of this policy, and these laws, you can choose to actually come under any of the laws to kind of bring your relief, your claim for damages. So, and again, one thing is that compensation under the law, we refer it as damages, right? So it's for you to now look at the law with your lawyer, with the person representing you, to see which one best suits your case. Because in the case you are the claimant here, your employer is the defendant, right? It's for you to now look at it too. And another thing for you to note is that each of these laws, they come with their own requirements, their own preconditions. So there are conditions you must fulfill, before you actually have access to the benefit, which is the compensation that comes with that law. Alright, so it's for you to now look at it. Which one? Let's look at this law. Let's look at this law. Let's look at this law. Let's look at the preconditions. Have we fulfilled these preconditions? Does it, suit our case? Does it favor our case? So it's for you to look at that to, determine that which, work for you. And yeah, so far we're going to look at, we started from giving a brief background, on how that, the work safety policy for employers, that employers need to create for employees, right, is based off, existing laws, existing legislations, right? And then we brought it down to looking at some of the duties which are inexhaustive, some of the duties of employers generally. And then we brought it down to looking at the fact that, it's not a one-sided thing. We need to balance everything together. The employee too has to cooperate with the employer to achieve because the essence of this policy is to ensure that the environment is safe for all, right? So now we're looking at how the employee can also chip in his own bit to ensure that, we achieve a safe environment. The environment is safe and free from harm and, hazards, any form of accidents, right? So looking at that, we now delved into the Nigerian position, on how that, where an employer fails to carry out some of these duties, this duty of care, of ensuring safety and health and the well-being of the employees, it can warrant negligence under the law. And then we looked at some of the, the liability, which could be partial, can be absolute, depending on how well the defendant, being the employer, is able to present his case through his attorney or lawyer, right? And then we also moved towards the penalty, being compensation. So the sum, it depends on what individual. We looked at cases. There are life cases that it depends on the person seeking the the compensation. Some people can say that, you've deprived me of my well-being, of my able to enjoy life, to be able to walk. Let's say it involves the leg. Maybe you had to amputate the leg or anything. It can now be, okay, you've prevented me from actually getting more jobs. I can't work now because of this leg. I can't do this. I can't go for this. I can't go for it. It depends on how it is presented, right? So, looking at all these things, they can now decide, okay, we want a claim of 100 million naira, we want a claim of 50 million naira. It varies. And of course, we looked at how that, there are different laws that inspire, this policy, and these different laws in itself, they have their own preconditions which must be fulfilled in order to enjoy the benefit of, getting your compensation. And then we also, and basically that's it. And this policy we're talking about is one of those policies that come with legal liability. Not all policies would ordinarily come with legal liabilities, right? So this one comes with legal liabilities. You need to, aside from drafting the policy, aside from getting a professional to draft that policy for you, it's very important for you to know that some of those things you've stated there could be used against you where you fail to adhere to it as an employer. You've decided that, okay, we're going to ensure that we're going to provide goggles for employers that work in this segment, in this department of the company. We're going to provide these, and then something happens that, and when they looked into it, they saw that you didn't actually provide the things you said. Of course, liability will come up, after that. So the whole essence of this so far is just to ensure that you understand, some of the liabilities that come with, not fulfilling your duty of care as an employer for your employees. So if there's any takeaway, I guess, is that you need to go ahead, and if you don't have a working policy on the safety and health and well-being, of course, of your employees, is for you to go ahead and draft something, and beyond drafting, communicate it to your employees. Let them understand what they are into. Let them understand the things that come around what they do. Some of the equipment they work with, the dangers, the possible things they can avoid, and how to deal with, how to interface with the equipment on ground. So it's very important to make them understand this, not just for you to draft and just share it for them. Go through it, educate them, organize trainings for them. It's all for their safety and for the overall good of the company, and of course yourself, from not to avoid situation of court matters and everything. Because let me even tell you the truth, court matters are really stressful, can stress the life out of you. So just for you to save yourself of that stress, just provide what you need to do. It will only cost you some money. You have to spend some money, right? So you save that one and then save yourself of stress in the future. Right, so, and that would be the end for this session. If you have any questions, anything you need us to go over, or any knotty issue you feel like you don't understand, please do well to reach out to us. You can comment on the comment section, and then we'll get back to you. Thank you for staying with me up to this point. I hope you're able to get or gain one or two things. I wish you a happy day. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for listening. Prof.